All right, that last look we worked on was a great one for sort of an outdoor bleach bypass look.
Yeah.
Here we're in a completely different sort of feeling. It's this great outdoor shot, lush green. We've got our center focus, although I'm a bit distracted by all the things at the edges. So can we come up with a look that sort of helps focus the viewer?
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing I think about this is that it's too like real for me. I want to make it more of like a print, right? I'm thinking like kind of 70s Instagram-ish, kind of like, you know, Polaroid, that kind of thing. Now, there's two other things that I want to mention before we actually develop the shot, and that's you don't actually have to do anything with color correction in Final Cut Pro 10 if you don't want to. And what I mean by that is if you come down to the effects browser here, in the effects area, you'll notice that we have a lot of different effects for different things. One of them being looks, right? So things like, hey, there's a bleach bypass. And actually, you'll notice that if you just hover your cursor over these different looks, you can actually get a feel for what that look is actually prior to applying it. So you can
use the Andy Griffith Show.
Right, exactly. So you can get a lot of sort of look or film development done, and we'll actually use one of these in just a second, just with that, without having to ever use the color board or actually develop a shot.
And you just double click to apply it or drag it on?
Either way, you can just double click it or drag it on. So here's what I'm gonna do. On this shot, as we discussed before, every shot has a correction on it. I'm gonna come over to the color board for this shot, and I'm gonna start out in sort of the exposure. And one of the things that defines sort of that Instagram-y kind of like Polaroid type kind of shot to me is that black's not really black, white's usually white, but we kind of have a sort of a flatter type look on our shots, right? Where this shot coming out of the camera, like all DSLRs, is going to give us kind of a really crisp, nice black, a lot of contrast. So I'm going to kind of buck the system here a little bit, because usually when you're developing a shot, you're like, I want to make black, black, white, white. I'm going to come into my blacks and actually lift that
halfway up?
Yeah, maybe not halfway, but maybe somewhere right around there.
Okay. It looks like it's sort of going to the 70s look now.
Yeah, I'm getting a little flatter. Maybe I'll add a little flatness in with my midtones, just a touch. And I'll bring my highlights down ever so slightly. You got to be careful in this look with the highlights, because if you bring them too down, it just starts looking like it's truly log. And that's not what we want. We want to just kind of get a flatter bottom end on things. All right, so that's working for me pretty well. I'm then going to come into my saturation control, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to kind of desaturate my shadows a little bit.
Right, so they're just not as, they don't have as much intensity now.
Right, and you'll notice that that green kind of over here where, you know, the shadow literally is getting a little less, right? And maybe we'll take my midtones and pop those just a little bit. So his shirt.
And skin tone,
His shirt, his skin tone, the guitar, that's all popping a little bit. Maybe I'll come back over to my exposure and actually up that black just even more, okay? And then we'll come over to my colors. And one of the things that you find in sort of that Instagram-y Polaroid kind of feel is that colors are just crazy. You know, sometimes
lots of yellows, greens.
Yeah, sometimes they're really crazy. We don't want to go too far with this. But what I want to do is go ahead and take my my shadows, which is this guy. Remember, this is overall control, which would kind of tint the image overall, which is not what I want to do.
Although that's not too far there.
That's not too bad, right? Or I could take my individual tonal range controls. So let's take my black control and let's bring that to something that's a little bit more kind of warmy, kind of over in this area. Kind of liking that. Maybe we'll take our highlights, push those into a little bit of kind of a greeny yellow thing. And again, this takes some experimentation, kind of just where you kind of like. That might be a little too pink, but that's
looking pretty good.
That's working better for me. And let's just add some warmth into my midtones. Okay, so let me just go ahead and toggle that off. And I think, you know, again, we can play around with this more. And actually, you know what? I am going to take a little of that pink out here. Here we go. Take that back there a little bit. Okay, that's working just a touch better for me. Okay, so if I toggle this on and off, Rich, you can see here's where we started, nice and crisp, very defined colors, kind of thing. And here's kind of a 70s Instagram-ish type wash. Now, to be clear, I haven't gone crazy with this, right? This is very subdued. I want to go a little more crazy with it. As you said—
Can we have some grunge?
Yeah, I want some grunge, and you want to focus the viewer's eye a little bit more.
Right.
So I'm going to add a new correction. And over here, I'm going to click on this button to add a new shape mask. And by default, it's a circle, which is fine, exactly what we want.
Right.
And I'm actually going to kind of just shape this around him, something like that, and maybe soften up my edges just a touch. Now, by default, if I go over to the color board for the shape mask, you'll notice down here at the bottom, it's defaulting to affecting the inside of the shape.
But we can reverse that.
I can reverse that. So if I go to the outside of the shape, now what I'm going to be doing is going to be affecting this area over here outside. So I'll go to exposure, and I'm take my highlights, just bring those down just a little bit. Maybe we'll soften that out just a touch more. Okay, that's working better. Maybe bring my highlights down a little bit more.
Okay. Now that's desaturating and darkening those areas a little bit. That's
Yep.
looking good.
Just to darken them up. Yep.
Is there a way to blur that a little bit?
Yeah, we could add a blur. Actually, what I think I want to do instead of a blur, Rich, is I actually want to come down here to my effects browser, and I actually want to go ahead and search for film. We got to go back up to all of our effects. There we go. Got aged film. Nah, that's definitely not the look I want. But film grain. Now, bear with me for a second. By default, that's looking very sepia. I don't want that look. I'm just going to apply that to the shot.
Right.
It gets added as an effect. You'll notice that there's a style, iMovie grain.
I never wanted to see the words iMovie in Final Cut Pro.
Right. If I switch that, hey, realistic grain. That's
Of course, that shouldn't be the default preset.
right. So there we go. You'll now notice the colors are back to that kind of wash that we did.
Okay.
And I have a grain control. And if I just actually go ahead and play this back for a second, you can see that I'm getting a little grain. Actually, it's a little too much for my take.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to bring that back just a little bit.
Okay.
Let's play that again.
Looks good.
Yeah, and now I have much more of a print look, right? I have sort of that nice kind of flat bottom end. I've focused my viewer's attention a little bit with the shadows, and we've grunged it up a little bit with some of that grain.
All right, Rob, I really like how these looks are coming together,
Yep.
and we can actually go in and save individual presets for some of these effects, right?
Right, so if, like, for example, my color, my correction there, when I did the kind of the flat wash, I could come down here to presets. I could save that out as a preset, so every time I kind of wanted that flat wash look, I could apply it to a clip. You could also just sort of copy this, paste attributes to other clips, copy and paste. If you had the whole, clips in the same scene, that would work as well.
Well, Rob, this is awesome, and it's clear that you've got some great ideas on how to get more things done with Final Cut 10. In fact, Rob actually has a detailed Final Cut Pro 10 color correction title here on lynda.com that covers correction and grading. I'd encourage you to check that out. And there are some other great classes as well, like some of our friends, Ava Shapiro and others, that you can also dig in deeper. Now, when we come back next week, we're going to take a look at a completely different application, Premiere Pro, right?
That's right, and we'll develop some looks there.
All right. See you next week.